That's the main clean riff from Welcome Home Sanitarium by Metallica. I'll include the tab. I'm going to do that for all the riffs in this little series, and I'll run through with you a couple of tips that I think might be useful. The first tip is how to interpret the tab. If you notice, when I was playing that, all the notes were ringing out cleanly, continuously. They weren't stopping or muting. That's the key thing to getting this riff sounding correctly. The reason that I wanted to share that with you is because when I first learnt to play this, I'd not been playing very long. I'd only been playing maybe, I don't know, a few months, maybe a year. I was massive into Metallica and just wanted to try and learn as much Metallica that was in my capability, that was possible for me to actually attempt. A lot of it was beyond what I could do. This being a slower one, I thought, well, we'll have a go at it. I couldn't read music. I'd only just figured out the very basics of reading tab. There was no YouTube, so I couldn't see how other people were playing it. Back in the day, we had these tab books, a bit like this. This is a Floyd one, not a Metallica one, but the same thing. If you look inside, it's just got the music for the songs. It's got the actual music notation as well as the tab for it as well. So that's what we had. They were quite expensive as well. If I remember correctly, for this one, it was a friend of mine that bought it. I'd bought another book, and we used to sort of, share them and lend them to each other for a week, and that way we didn't each have to buy all the books. Back in the day, they were about 20 quid or something, and I'm talking like back in the late 80s, maybe late 80s, so that's quite a lot of money. But anyway, I digress. So I looked at the tab and tried to just play along with the tab as best I could, and all I did was look at the notes, the numbers on the strings, and I tried to play them. And this is something like what I ended up with at my first attempt at playing the riff that I've just played, because I didn't know better. It was, I don't know if I can replicate it, but pretty awful. There's a few mistakes that I made just in my understanding of the tab, so let's just get a few things straight before we end up learning it wrong, because I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made. So going through, I'll share the tab with a link. If we have a look at it, I'm going to look at the first 12 notes to begin with, and I'm going to break those down into little groups of 4 notes. So the first 4 notes I want to look at is going to be an open E string, then 2nd fret on my A string, 4th fret on my D string, and then open G string. That's the first 4 notes of this piece. Now, hopefully you'll notice the way that I've played it there is by keeping my fingers on the strings whilst I'm playing it. The way that I did it all those years ago wrongly, I was just trying to hit each note. So I was, and each note was sounding. I had the right notes, but the full thing wasn't ringing out. So rather than the wrong way, by keeping my hand in the position, I've got the notes ringing out. So again, with a little bit of experience, what I have now, I didn't have then, I've interpreted the tab, and I've actually tried to understand, read between the lines. So what have I got there? Apart from my open string, start with my open string on my E, the 2 notes that I'm fretting, so the 2nd fret and the 4th fret note. Now I know that's a little chord. That's actually a B5 chord, a B5 chord, so a 5th power chord, if you will. So in between the 2 open strings, the E string and the G string, I've got that little 5th power chord. So I can make a little power chord shape. In this instance, I'm using my 1st and my 4th fingers to make that little power chord shape, and I'm just playing the open strings either side of it, and they all ring out. Now, for the next group of 4 notes, I've noticed, again, with the experience that I've got an open string, and then I've got 2 fretted notes. In this case, open E again, 3rd fret on my A string, 5th fret on my D string, and again the open G. So the second group of notes. Now, I know, because I've just done it, I'm using that same little power chord shape for that second group of notes. So when I'm going from my first 4 notes with that little B5 power chord, all I need to do is move up that power chord 1 position, it becomes a C5 power chord, and play the same strings again. And guess what? For the third group of 4 notes, I can just move that little power chord up 2 frets to position 5, same strings, and play the same across the 4 strings again. So I'm not all over the place trying to go. Look at how much effort that is, and it sounds rubbish. I just get my little chord shape, move it up, and just treat them as 1, 2, 3, 4 little groups of 4 chords. So that's the first half of the riff sorted. Just keep that little power chord shape on. The trick is not to mute out your open strings. What you might find is when you first start doing it, when you put that chord shape on, you might accidentally mute out your G string, so it might sound more like. So it's just a case of getting nice clean contact on your chords and not catching your open strings. So that's the first 12 notes. Remember, the little 5th chord, power chord, is your friend when you're learning to play this. Then the second part of the riff, it changes slightly, and you'll see if you look at the tab, you've got a couple of little lines on the tab, and it says underneath SL. That means a slide. So we're going to perform a slide. Now, normally when we perform a slide, we're going to obviously play 1 note, slide to another note. That could be up or it could be down. In this case, we're looking at sliding between the 5th and the 3rd fret and vice versa. So sliding notes, quite basic, and if you're not used to that, I've done a video, I'll do a link to that as well. Now, what could catch you out here is the timing. These slides are actually known in this particular song, in this piece, as grace notes. So they're not lasting for the full length as the other notes. So rather than, in the instance of the first slide, I'll just talk about, so we're going from the 5th fret to the 3rd fret on the E string. So we're going sliding from to there. But we don't want it to be the same length as the other notes, so it's not going to be on the 1, 2, 3, 4 count. We're actually aiming just for the second note, where you see the little line and the SL. The second note is the important note. If you look on the tab, the first note is actually, it's printed smaller on both instances. So when we're doing that, rather than going, our slide wants to be almost straight down to the second note. So putting that together, we're starting off slightly earlier than the slide. So we've got a 5th fret on the E string, 4th fret on the A string, and an open D string. Now again, with a little bit of experience that I do now have, I recognise that as it's like the start of your G chord. Imagine your open G chord. So your first 2 notes, your first 3 notes of your G chord, if you play basic G chord shape, all I'm doing is moving those 2 notes. I don't need to play the full G. Those first 2 notes, first 2 fingers, I'm playing them up in the 5th position instead of what I normally do for the G in the 3rd position. So when I get to note 13, we've done the first 12 using this. So that's your first 12 notes. So the 13th note, we're starting there, the 5th fret. So we're playing basically, you know, the lower part of our G chord, and then we're just going to move that down to its normal position. So and then back up again. So it's all going to be in the same count when we put it together. I'll play it once again at the end. But remember not to play those slides at the same tempo. They're quick slides, so we're just aiming for the second note. If the slides are tripping you up for now, forget about them and just play the second note that it shows. I'll do that now. So going from note 13 onwards, forget the slides, I'll just play the notes. That's without adding in those little slides. They're an embellishment, they do make it sound a little bit more spicy, but because they are, as I say, they're a grace note, it's not a normal note, so it's just, we're sliding to the second note, so the first note is unimportant. It doesn't sound that much different really, and certainly if you're playing it along to a backing track or with a band, you might not even hear the difference. So play it once through without the slides, and then once I'll try and play it through again with the slides in. It's actually not that much different. So perhaps learn it without the slides to start with, and then when you've got the notes in your fingers, in your hand, you can add those slides in afterwards. So I put it all together, all the notes are going to be played at the same tempo, at the same count. I'll play the full riff through, and I'll do it without the slides in, and then I'll play the full riff through again, and I'll add the slides in, and you can see there really isn't that much difference to it. So, as I said, probably learn it without the slides to begin with, and then you can always add those in afterwards. All your notes want to be sounding out cleanly. They don't want to be damping or muting or sounding fluffed. Not when you first start learning your chords and you accidentally catch them with your other hands. So play it clean. Start off slowly. It's quite a slow tempo on the riff anyway, but you know, when you're learning something new, you can always slow it down a little bit further. So that's Sanitarium, Welcome Home by Metallica. It's this is the riff there's a couple of bars of introduction on the song which are like a natural harmonic thing, and then it goes straight into the riff, and that riff repeats throughout the main verse section of the song where Hetfield's singing. So enjoy, try and get those techniques right. The main thing is your little fifth power chords when we're going up for the first 12 notes, and then switch to your little, if you imagine it as almost like your G, open G chord for the second part of the riff. And if you do that, I'm sure you'll enjoy.